Welcome to Undercomplicating Stuff, where we, two psychologists and coaches with over 40 years of combined experience, share our insights to help undercomplicate important topics. A friendly reminder that this video is meant for conversational and entertainment purposes only. Please see the information section below this video for additional resources. So I'm Dr. Julie Radico. I am a psychologist, a coach, an author, and a speaker, and I'm here with Dr. Gedeon.
Thanks, Julie. I'm Stacey Gedeon. I'm a health psychologist and the founder and CEO of a healthcare consulting and professional coaching business. And today's question is tied to a video we did recently about self-awareness. Only today we're talking about how do I know if I'm being externally self-aware? Or maybe another way to say it is, what is external self-awareness? And when we're thinking about this topic, it's really a way to understand how you're showing up in the world in terms of your behavior, your communication, verbal, nonverbal, and how all these things might be experienced by other people that you interact with all day long. So at work, at home, out doing chores, shopping, things like this. This is kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about external self-awareness. And there's an important distinction. So this isn't about pleasing other people or morphing into what other people may want us to be or look like or act like. We're talking about being authentic to yourself and showing up in a way or interacting with other people in a way that's intentional and that is consistent with who you are, but also keeping in mind that the context and the situations in which you're interacting throughout the day change, and you may want to adapt and show up in different ways. So for example, if I am spending time with my sister and we're joking around, I am going to be really comfortable and very authentic. Whereas if I'm in a professional setting, perhaps giving a presentation, I am going to present in a way that's a more professional and in line with how I want to be received by the audience. And it's important to be aware. It's almost a meta thing where you're sort of noticing how other people might be responding or perceiving you, really is what we're talking about.
This topic is kind of meta, and we're thinking about our internal self-awareness, which is all the stuff that's happening in our bodies, our emotions, our thoughts, our physiological sensations, and then external self-awareness is us wanting to be aware of all the stuff that happens outside of our bodies. Like right now, you can hear what I'm saying. So you're hearing the tone of my voice, the rate of my speech. You're hearing how pressured or unpressured it is. And I'm communicating things to you through that. And in this idea of self-awareness, I want to know how much of a sense I have about what I'm intentionally putting out there. And I pause on the word intentionally because that's, I think, the goal. And when we talk about self-awareness, there's no right or wrong level here of like, oh, well, you need to be this self-aware so you can do this to please other people or not act this way. Or it's an awareness to decide, I want to show up authentically, intentionally, purposefully in a way that feels congruent, which I realize is a big jargony word, but in a way that feels like, yeah, this is true to me. I'm showing up as Julie in this space. And I might, as Stacey alluded to, like I might have like a professional Julie hat. I might have a, sister Julie hat. I might have a friend Julie hat. And I can be authentic in all of those spaces, but in a way that's different. I really think it's important too, as we think about this and talk about this, that self-awareness, this idea of being aware of how we're showing up in the world so we can intentionally choose that, that is different from perception management. Perception management is jargon. It's this idea of I'm showing up specifically in a way to hopefully get the person I'm interacting with or the people that I'm interacting with to view me in a certain way. So again, going back to, oh, I might have my tone of voice a specific way, or the volume of my voice, or how it feels pressured or not, because I'm hoping that Stacey hears me a certain way and feels soothed or welcomed or comfortable. Like that's perception management. That's me trying to appear, oh, I am this way because I'm hoping that impacts you a certain way. That's different from self-awareness. It can get all mixed up in there. That is different from self-awareness. Self-awareness is me being aware that I might be doing that or that what I'm doing and how I'm just showing up authentically and maybe intentionally is having an impact or is making me feel a certain way. So they can be mixed together, but that's not necessarily the case. So really just being aware as we're talking about this that the take home point is not for you to go, oh, I need to be really self-aware so I can make somebody else feel a certain way about me. No. I mean, it's part of what we do as social beings is we do this perception management. Like, I want you to know that I like you. And so I'm going to send signals that like that is what we do. That's different from the heart of just being aware that when you get stressed, you might show up in certain kinds of ways. Or when you are feeling sad, you might show up in certain kinds of ways. When you don't like somebody, you do like somebody, you might be showing up in ways that you might not be aware of. You just want to know how do you show up in spaces so you can have more intention around that.
I think about you and I both work with people who might be shifting jobs, and perhaps during the interview process or things that they brought up as patterns where they've struggled at work, we'll say, it can be really helpful to know how you're coming across. Someone who maybe is chewing gum during an interview, maybe they're trying to be casual, but perhaps the person interviewing them sees that as unprofessional. So, a lot of what we're talking about also is being authentic and being intentional in how you're acting and what you're communicating that aligns not only with your values and but also your goals. So if your goal is to get a job, it probably would be beneficial to dress in a way that the job would think was appropriate. And if you're not aware, you might even want to ask some people like, okay, what did you perceive in that meeting? Because I think maybe it was taken in a way I didn't intend. And if there are people that you trust and you can ask them, give me objective feedback about this. I remember a situation where a client came to me and kept getting feedback that they weren't paying attention in meetings. So we sort of role played and interacted, and really what it came down to was their way of thinking meant breaking eye contact and sort of look like they were not paying attention. They were. They just needed to do that to sort of collect themselves and then respond in a way that they wanted to, and had no idea how it was perceived because they just hadn't really been informed. Nobody had brought that up to them. And so that was really beneficial. So that's where knowing how we're presenting ourselves to the world and wanting that to be aligned with what we intend to be presenting to the world is really helpful without losing yourself.
I'm mindful as we talk about this topic, there is so much nuance in how every individual on this planet shows up in their own unique way with their own unique experience of themselves and how they interact with the world. And self-awareness is a skill at times, and it's not something that we inherently learn. And we talk about this on our internal self-awareness episode. Please go check that out. But as kids, like we often aren't taught to like, well, what are you experiencing in your body right now? How is that making you emotionally, physiologically, and mentally feel or experience? Like we ask kiddos, like, how does that make you feel? Great start. Then like we move along and great, you had a feeling, let's move. It's like, but you're constantly having feelings. And how our external awareness of ourselves and the way that we're showing up in the world that's a constant ongoing skill that no matter how we navigate the world, whatever our level of self-awareness internally or externally might be, it's a skill that we can build if we take time and if we choose to. Good self-awareness helps you choose how you want to show up and lets you know that there are things about your style and how you navigate the world and how you communicate or how you choose not to communicate that are totally okay. And the idea is that you have this self-awareness to be making that decision for yourself. to not feel like life or things are happening to you, but that you get to, as much as possible, decide what feels healthy for you, what feels good for you, feels normal for you. Say I'm in a big auditorium and there's 500 people and somebody asks for somebody to respond to a question. Do I have the self-awareness to know that I internally am going to feel comfortable enough? I'm going to be able to regulate my heartbeat and like my breathing and my thoughts and emotions well enough to walk up to that mic and answer the question that they asked. Or do I have the self-awareness to know, like, oh, that's a great question. If there were 100 people in the room, maybe I would answer. Or one-on-one, I would answer. Or I just I'm gonna absorb that question. I have the self-awareness to know that, like, I'm gonna take this information in the best by just listening and hearing other people's reactions and thoughts. So self-awareness lets you choose how you show up in a way that feels, again, really like congruent and good for you. And some of that we have to learn by trying it out and sitting through the discomfort because as your friendly neighborhood psychologist, who again are not your psychologist, but good advice in general is you don't want to avoid situations that make you feel a little uncomfortable, but that you know you could get through. Avoidance maintains anxiety. You do want to keep yourself safe, and there are some situations that you would just decide, well, I'm going to avoid that because I feel safer. Makes sense. But if you want to stretch out of your comfort zone, that could be a good thing to do. But you want to have this self-awareness to be able to let yourself do that.
You mentioned talking about part of this in terms of external self-awareness is understanding the societal norms and workplace culture, role-based expectations. All these things can be factors in terms of how we act in the world and the side of ourselves that we're putting forward. And also keeping in mind, though, that knowing the norms doesn't mean you have to obey them. And that may sound completely opposite of what we were just talking about, but hear me out. So what I'm thinking of, let's say you're at some work-related event and someone is telling jokes, and that's the culture. So the norm is they tell jokes when they're off site from work. However, maybe you hear a joke that is offensive. Now, on the one hand, you want to put out there that you are certainly a team player. You enjoy going out with the group of people from work. At the same time, it really strikes a chord in you because your values are being impacted. It's not something that you subscribe to in terms of whatever joke that was inappropriate or maybe just not your humor. And so it's okay. That goes back to the self-awareness internally to also know when you're needing to leave a situation or not participate in something because it's inconsistent with what you truly stand for. So keep in mind that you always have choices, and we want people to really be intentional and thoughtful with what they're putting out in the world in terms of who they are, and that it's always, again, safe and may not always be comfortable, but we certainly don't want to override our values when we're doing so. And if I think about a key takeaway from today, I think it's that we're adaptable, and it's beneficial to be adaptable in different situations, and keeping in mind that your core, your values, your beliefs can all be intact and ideally should be intact. And those aren't wavering, with the exception of maybe as you go through life, your values may change, but keeping true to yourself when you're interacting with other people and how you are presenting yourself to the world, even if the context changes a bit.
You don't need to change yourself to meet others' expectations. There are caveats here. I understand that some situations people need to keep themselves safe, and that is always a priority. Ultimately, self-awareness helps you have a sense of how you're showing up in spaces and how you want to show up in spaces, even when you know that somebody might not be your best friend because of it, or you might lose half the audience, but that is who you are. That's authentic to you. And you're making an informed decision to show up in an authentic way that you're not needing to change yourself to meet the expectations of others. The hope that I have for everybody listening to this is that We layered on this a lot of really complex stuff because it's so intertwined with like perception management and how you do show up in spaces that impact how others perceive you, or the things you can do to comfort yourself. Like there's a lot here that we scratched the surface of. So if you want us to talk more about this, dig into more areas, please let us know. Also, be kind to yourself. The step that I would encourage people to take first is just to increase your thoughts about how am I showing up in this space right now? The jargony metacognition of like thinking about your thoughts, thinking about what you're thinking about the situation, thinking about how you showed up in that situation, asking for feedback, great. But it's kind of like if you could walk around your life with a camera that's showing you how you're showing up in the world, that data is for you then to reflect on and go, yeah, I felt that that was a pretty healthy way for me to show up. There's room for you to consider how others are responding to you. Totally valid. There's a really important point here in the self-awareness is, are you okay with how you're showing up? Are you aware of how you're showing up? And what do you want to intentionally do to choose of how you want to show up in ways that feel healthy for you? So if this topic resonated with you, please share it with somebody that you care about. Also, please like, comment, and subscribe. And you can send us messages on our LinkedIn or our YouTube channel with questions that you'd like us to discuss in future episodes.